Let's see. We had much of the part of the course that taught us how to collect and use all sources. And we do it for the purpose that you should make an interview, write it, give a transcript of it, and bring it to the exam. And you will have some questions concerning that from my teaching. And you're also expected to use this when you're doing your major paper. And I have noticed that some of you have started considering the topic of your paper, and you are welcome anytime to come and discuss it with me. What you should do is to find a topic, and then you should find a research question. That is the most important part. To find a question, you should ask yourself, what I especially find out concerning this topic? What is most interesting about this topic? And then you could give an answer preliminary. You may change it later on, but as you think from the beginning what would be the answer to that question, that will give you your thesis. But the first important part is the question. And that question should be something that all your paper is about. Every single sentence should point to this question. So it will also help you to eliminate material that is not necessary to include. It will help you to focus your paper on what is especially interesting. So find a topic and think about what could be especially interesting to ask when it comes to this. And the reason why I press on this, is that it is important not only in this discipline, but you can use it in many other disciplines when you're going to write papers. Also when you're going to write your master thesis, it's very important, this research question and thesis. And then find some literature and some sources, both written sources and oral sources. But you're welcome to come and ask about it. Yesterday, we considered the problems in producing and using all sources. And we also talked about how we could make up for those problems, those challenges. What could we do about it when we use the sources so that we can get reliable information from our interviews? We saw that it is a problem that we create the sources so that our person play a part in that. We can only ask about what we know something about before. So the questions are limited by our pre-knowledge. We saw that people's impression of us also will influence the information they give us. We saw that the situation around the interview will also influence the information, the atmosphere, those present, and therefore we should think about how we would set up the situation around the interview. We saw that the main fundamental problem is that what we get is not a contemporary source, because what people tell is what they remember of, perhaps sometimes of our past. And they may have forgotten something, they may have distorted some information, changed it, and we saw that it is especially difficult to place event in a chronological order, that we say or find out when it happened, and if they tell about different events, place them in the right order of time. We talked about how we could then point to events that we know when happened and ask, did that you tell happen before or after the Ethiopian Revolution, the takeover of Jihadi and so on? Then we also saw especially how it's difficult to realize that things have changed. Often people think that as it is today, it has always been like this. Especially when it comes to views, attitudes, feelings, people tend to think that what they feel today is how they felt earlier. What they think today is how they thought earlier. So to get people's view of baptism, for example, many years ago, is very difficult because they have learned a lot about baptism since then. And that's what they tell you. To get the worldview, the meaning of the spirits, the importance of the spirits, is also difficult. We should then, now, as we have learned this, go to the question we haven't answered. Going to Kabbalah, again, we go often to Kabbalah, but you can then try to find parallels in your own church and in your own area. So what we see in Kabbalah, it's only examples. And then you can find similar instances in your own context. But from the beginning, we talked about those two versions of the split. The Mechanismus version that said it was about infant baptism that was prohibited, and therefore somebody broke away to be able to baptize infants. And we saw the Canonical version that was about drinking alcohol. The church forbade that, and those who wanted to continue, they broke away. We saw these minutes from a conference of Ethiopian evangelical churches, and we discussed, we didn't agree completely on what they told those minutes was the reason. Was it baptism, or was it alcohol, or was it both? What was the main reason? If both were causes. But as I said, it was difficult to find, or impossible to find, written sources in Kaliwat about this baptism question. So I had to go and use all sources, using in interviews, and here you have part of the result. And then we can discuss it in relation to what we have seen up to now. This question has been an issue of constantly discussion between also SIA missionaries and Lutheran missionaries in Mechanismus. Once there was a Norwegian missionary, Olav Severos, who wrote a dissertation, Church Mission Relation it's called, and in his work he also touched this question. And he wrote, I think he wrote, it was Brian Farber or it was Cottrell, that he wrote and asked the question, have you ever baptized infants in the SIA religious church? And then Cottrell, and he happened also to be the first director of Aegis, he wrote this Norwegian Lutheran pastor and scholar, and said, as you see at the top of the first page, I should make it clear that in each area after the first baptism had been performed, subsequent baptisms were performed by Ethiopian believers, and in every area this has taken the form of adult believers' baptism by immersion. The practice grew up before the Italian occupation and has continued uniformly ever since. So no doubt for this SIA missionary, never there have been an instance of infant baptism. Then I got in contact with a missionary as I was doing my work, who was called McDonald. He lived in Canada at that time, but he had been in Kabbalah in the 50s when all this happened. And in fact, I visited him in Canada and I wrote letters to him. And on a certain point, I was suggesting that, on the basis of what I have found, that infant baptism had taken place sometimes. And I wrote that I have found clear evidence of that. Then he commented back that I have written that there's clear evidence of the fact that infant baptism was widely practiced in Kabardia while the missionaries were away during and after the Italian occupation. And I brought that just to try him, to provoke him. And then he said, I wonder just how clear your evidence is. Widespread? I myself never heard a hint of it. I doubt it very much. And he was there in the 50s. He was there during the split. And he said, I have never heard anything as the reason for the split except alcohol. Except alcohol. And he even tried to convince the church leaders not to be too strong on that. He said, he tried to convince them, don't be too strong about that. It is the poorer part that want to drink the water, but they can drink the water. That was what he said. But they were very strong on that. They continued to forbid it, and therefore the split happened. But still, I wanted to find out. So I started doing my research with this question in mind. Sometimes I ask congregations, have you ever baptized infants? And from congregation to congregation, they answered, no, we have never baptized infants. Only adult believers baptism. And then I changed the question, have you ever received a statement from Provincial, that is the main center, that forbid you to baptize infants? No, we have never received that. Then one day, I was interviewing two persons, Dago Abrebo and Therese Mune, in Skjåne, in Badawacho area. It's on the road from Alaba to Sogn. You drive through Skjåne. And those two persons, they said like this. Until today, we do not baptize infants in the Catholic Church. Our argument is that the faith of the parents cannot save them. Because the Bible teaches us that the parents would not suffer the consequences of their children's sin, and the children also would not suffer the sins for the sins of their parents. Thus, everybody should be mature enough to repent its sin and confess its faith before baptism. But until now, I do not understand why Canisius Church decided to baptize infants, and what is the justification of their doctrine. I think their belief is that the faith of the parents can save their infants, so the infants can be baptized. So he just say what he has learned in the church. But then suddenly he continued. And honestly speaking, we ourselves used to baptize infants at the very beginning because of ignorance. That was when Italy invaded the country around 3033, when the missionaries were not here. In 1933, Italy was defeated and chased away from the country. Then the missionaries came back and started to teach us the Bible. As we received their teaching, we stopped baptizing infants. That was in 34. And then I continued to ask, had you received a statement from Provincial not to baptize infants? No, we did not receive any written statement, but we were instructed by speech, orally, not to baptize infants. That was also after the missionaries were returned. The oral instruction was given in the meeting. They passed a resolution which declares that a Christian should only be baptized when he is mature enough to confess his faith. Once a person is baptized after he confessed his faith by his own personal decision, there's no need to baptize him again. That was around 29, immediately after the Italians were defeated and chased away from the country. And remember that even some Italians and their prisoners were among the people. So, suddenly he remembered, that's right, we once baptized our infants. And then, when I continued doing my interviews, I could change the question a bit. I said, I have heard in Skjåne that they used to baptize infants. How was it here? And then I got other information. Some say, no, we know that they did that in Skjåne, but we never did that here. But others said, yes, we have to admit that there was a period during the occupation while the missionaries were away that we baptized some infants. I visited a congregation in Danza area in Solohadia and interviewed a man called Daniel Halak. And you see what he says on the next page. Would you tell us about baptism? I was baptized in the same year, 37. Before baptism, they taught us that those who believed and baptized would be saved. Even I myself read the passage from the Bible, and I felt in great urgency of baptism. I also learned that Jesus himself was baptized. Those baptism is necessary for my salvation, so I was baptized. Did you baptize infants in this area? Yes, they were baptized. The argument for this practice was as following. That means during the occupation. Even though the infants cannot confess faith in Christ, their parents are Christians. After all, their life belongs to God. In the Bible, nothing is mentioned against infant baptism. So it's good to baptize according to the instruction of the Bible. Why did you stop this practice now? Later, we learned that those people who were baptized in their infancy did not stand in their Christian faith after they are grown up. So we decided that it's good to baptize children only when they are mature enough to confess their faith in Christ. And the interesting thing was that this was in Danza congregation during a church meeting. And I was first sitting together with Daniel Navarro alone and interviewing him. Then a church leader came in, and I asked him the same question. Did you baptize infants? And he said, no. But my assistant, he noticed that he swallowed his no. He said, I could feel that he knew that he was not telling the truth. And then the other man was here, and he has just said that they baptized infants. And now came the leader and said the opposite. And then a discussion started between those two. And I recorded the discussion, and I just sat and listened. And afterward, I had the discussion translated, and the discussion revealed that it was the case. The church leader had to admit, yes, that is right. We baptize sometimes infants. I also interviewed Beck Walku. He lived a bit further down. He has passed away now. You may know him, yes. And you know Shekovic and the sons. Yeah. I was close to this family. He was a leader in Stojogene. Yeah, south in Kabul. And he said they who baptized children while the missionaries were away did that because they said that if children die without being baptized on the 4th and the 18th day, then they will be lost. So they baptized in order that children is saved. So that is what the all sources tell us. That is what the all sources tell us. And now the question for you is, what do you think? What could we conclude from the sources that we have looked at up to now? What do you think? Yeah?
There are two views towards this baptism and adult baptism.
Mm-hmm.
So these two understandings, sometimes we see some kind of fear that some of the individuals here encounter, like maybe I'm wrong, I should get the baptism of adulthood. Sometimes, and the stand there is not sometimes firm. while the other side of infant baptism is like advocating for infant baptism. But somehow I believe from this history, the one circulating in this class, there is some kind of relation with the timing of the coming of the missionaries and the Italian occupation and what happened actually in between those years, 5 years. Normally we say 5 years of occupation. So there is one issue. I think further dig. I think maybe your further research will tell us in the future class. But what made them do this kind of infant exercise is also one issue. What prohibited them? What, because they were instructed maybe by the missionaries to do adult baptism at that point. Now all those views comes, and we need to dig deeper also. There's a homework to do. I think maybe it will be unveiled by your final research.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but I haven't that much more that I will give you on this.
Okay.
That is what we're going to discuss. I mean, there's one information more that you should have. Before the occupation, among the SIA missionaries, we also had some from a Presbyterian background. And as you may know, Presbyterians used to baptize infants. And one of them was Clarence Duff, that was the main missionary in Kabata. He was stationed in Durham. And he was known to be in favor of infant baptism because of his Presbyterian background. After the occupation, he left SIM and joined a Presbyterian mission. And after the occupation, SIM, so to say, made sure that all the missionaries were in favor of believers' baptism. Whereas before the occupation, it has been a little bit mixed. They have had some missionaries, also a Lutheran, that was in favor of infant baptism. And that was from the side of Jesus. One of the arguments that we have had missionaries in favor of infant baptism. They baptized infants, but after the occupation, they were just more in line, all in favor of believers' baptism, and therefore they forbid infant baptism. But we can see from the sources that even if Clarence Duff was in favor of infant baptism, he never taught that. He accepted that the policy of the church was believers' baptism. So even if he was missionary in Kabata, it was known that he was in favor personally of infant baptism, he never taught that. And he accepted that SIM's policy was believers' baptism. So before the occupation, what the missionaries taught was believers' baptism. But there were only in Kabata very few converts before the occupation. Then the missionaries disappeared for 5 years and more than 5 years. The local people took over the leadership. The church started to grow in that period. And it is in this period that the sources say that some started to baptize infants, even if the teaching of the missionaries before the occupation had been the opposite. So the question is then, based on this, what is our conclusion concerning infant baptism? And the next interesting question is, if it is true that some baptize infants, why did they do that? What is the reason? I mean, the policy of the church was, from the missionaries, to baptize only believers, adult believers. Why did they start baptizing infants? What could be the reason? Could you conclude first from the sources if they did that, and in case if they did that, why they did that? Do we have some ideas about that?
One minor.
Yeah?
I think I'm just speculating. Maybe many of us came from the Orthodox religion, I mean the Orthodox belief. So as we all know, the Orthodox people needs reformation. We say they don't have to change everything. We need to reform them through revival, the like. So maybe when they became converted, they took this religious exercise based on maybe some verse of the Bible, I don't know. So they kept on giving the tradition, passing the tradition to their next generation, like the Kalfur, religious, those like the Bunan, the one is that's a demonic activity, but this is a religious activity.
They keep something from the past.
Keep so many things. We have so many things that are unexplainable that much. Thank you.
Do you have something in the source that support your? If you look in the sources you have in front of you, do you have something in the source that could support your conclusion or your idea?
I'm just taking the history of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Orthodoxship,
But I think there's also something in the source that you can use.
Colleagues, helps me.
Yeah, your colleagues can help. Yeah.
It's clear that there is a shift of practice here.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that shift might come from the missionaries. Those came back and started to teach them the Bible. And it's here in the I think on the third or the second paragraph. It says in 19th century, Catholic people came chased away from their country on the first page. Then the missionaries came back and started to teach us the Bible. As we received their teachings, we stopped baptizing infants. So those teachings led them to stop infant baptism. So that might be the cause for the shift.
For the shift from infant baptism.
Yeah.
But the strange thing is, that is the question. Before the occupation, what they have been taught was believers' baptism. And they are taught believers' baptism again when the missionaries are back. But in the meantime, even if they have been taught believers' baptism from the beginning, they start baptizing infants when they are alone, when the missionaries are out of the country. Why do they do that? In spite of the teaching. And Mikia's point and say maybe it is because of influence from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Perhaps it is because some had a background from that church that made it natural for them to baptize infants. And my question is, I think it's a good guess, but do we have something in the source that support that?
Yes.
Well, what?
On the answer of the Kalaroku, he said that someone said to them, if the children die without being baptized on the 14th, 18th, then they will be lost.
Exactly.
This practice is very common in Orthodox.
Exactly. In Orthodox Church, they baptize on certain days after birth, and that he mentioned that the children was baptized during the occupation on certain days, indicate that it was because of the influence from the Orthodox Church. Because why should they then otherwise baptize on certain days? It shows that it was because they were used to do that, baptize infants, and not only baptize infants, but do it on certain days. So in this way, this is to learn you how to analyze sources, to get surprising information out of it. So those new converts, many of them were in opposition to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, that was the church of the Neftenias, the Amharas, that didn't want that Christianity. But still, even so, they were influenced by it. Even if they didn't want the church of the Neftenias, who had come and conquered the area, they still were influenced by that. So I think you're right. It's a question of influence. That is one of the reasons. But historical events or phenomenon never or very seldom just has one reason. There could be other reasons, and what could that be? I should say, in addition to that, it is not mentioned here, but you have the old Hadia religion, it's called Fandano. Fandano religion is a mixture of traditional Hadia religion and Islam. You know, Hadia came originally from the east, around Hara, or a little bit to the west of Hara, and they immigrated to the present area. So they were Muslims on a very early point, and then developed a religion called Fandano that was a mixture of traditional local elements and Islam. And this Fandano religion also had a kind of a baptism ritual. When somebody who were not Hadia or Fandano wanted to become a Fandano follower, Fandancho it was called, they had a kind of a baptism ceremony. They had to be sprinkled with water, and they had to bite the skin of a hippo in order to, and this ritual made them Fandano or Fandancho. Religion is Fandano, the follower is Fandancho. And I mean, so they also in the local religion has a kind of a ritual that made people followers. And that may also have influenced them. So that they say, our children should be Christians. We have a ritual that made them Christians, and that is baptism, as in Fandano and in the Orthodox Church. And what I just mentioned is because that shows the very interesting character of South Ethiopian religious environment. There's an article on that written by Ulrich Braukämper, where he shows that all over southern Ethiopia, you have had 3 different religions working and interacting with each other. And that is Christianity, Islam, and traditional religion. And they have been there for 1500 years now. And they have been there and they have steadily, constantly interacted with each other. And that applies to not only Kabbalah, but to many other areas of southern Ethiopia. That makes it very interesting, a very interesting case. And you can find many different kinds of religion that in different ways have mixed elements from those 3 religions. And Fandano is just one example of that. Yeah. But here we have, I think that Sega, you also had an idea?
Yeah. The speaker, I was comparing, I think the analysis is going to the direction that the division in the split is due to major need due to the baptism issue. I think that's what you are just analysis is directing us. But according to the Bible in John 17:22, it says that Jesus prayed about the unity, concerning unity. I have given them the glory you have given me, so they may be one as we are one. I don't know how we analyze those interviews. I also don't know that maybe this class any assumption about the baptism concerning even in this letter. One interview says that son after those it is related baptism is either saved or not saved. Even this class may not be that doctrine may not be the same. That from the previous data that you have given us, associated and Marshall, even in the way the writer reported, in the final part, even despite those auto group like auto in others, he said even one revelation, there remains. We see a lot of things that from Jesus' prayer in the morning, from all what I have tried to say, that there are many issues, even financial issues, in every discussion. Every part, there is also financial issue. Even in the first list, Kambata says that if we are separated, we bring money, they say. Even at that, every conversation up to the last one, I see money is raised as an issue.
Yeah, that's right.
Jesus, when he teaches there are two governments, either God or man. Maybe the motive is that he knows the doctrinal issue, even though baptism doesn't bring anyone to heaven, we know that. It's just outer ceremonial issue. So, don't you think that it is majorly the spirit majorly goes to many or other issues than the baptism issue?
But what I think is that if you take this class, myself included, we will have different theology on baptism. For some of us, baptism is a confession of our conversion, of our faith. For others of us, baptism is God's sacrament that, together with faith, will regenerate us. From this, we will be born again and be Christians. So we have all, if you take this room, different opinions on baptism. But when it comes to church history, we leave those theological questions, doctrinal questions aside, and try to, out of the sources, find out what happened. And when we try to find out what happened, we should be aware that we are not influenced by our view of baptism. Because that view we could discuss from the Bible together in New Testament studies and in dogmatic, systematic theology. But here, we just want to find out what happened. We want to find out very concrete, did they baptize infants and did they not baptize infants? And that's our task. And some may be in favor of believers' baptism, but still find out that they baptized infants. And some may be in favor of infant baptism, but may find out that they didn't baptize infants. So our view of baptism is, so to say, irrelevant here. We only have the task to find out what happened. You see? That is our task as church historians. Then, when we take a systematic theology course or a New Testament course, then we can discuss what is the biblical view of baptism.
What is the cover like the alcohol? Even they raise the alcohol as a cover issue. They raise the baptism as a cover issue. But there is hidden feeling of importance, feeling of management, feeling of equals.
It could, yeah. That is the work of the historians to find out whether the reason they gave was only a cover-up of other reasons. That is a historical work. Just as I told concerning the split that was suffered in my church, they said the reason for the split was doctrinal disagreements, but I found out that it was a relation between two brothers that was bad, and they just covered this by giving some doctrinal reasons. But the real reason was that the younger brother felt that the elder brother was favored during their childhood. And that is church history, to find out what is the real, at the bottom of the reason. But I should also mention, sorry, what do you say? No, just
From the presentation, it seems that we are concluding a reason of the infant baptism is two. The first is the traditional belief, and the second is the influence of Orthodox Church. And I have one thing from the response of maybe is it Ghana? On the page. There is a question which says, "Did you baptize infant in this area?" His answer is, yes, they were baptizing. The argument for this practice was as follows: even though the infant cannot confess faith in Christ, their parents are Christians. After all, their life belongs to God. In the Bible, nothing is mentioned against infant baptism. So it is good to baptize according to the instruction of the Bible. It seems this is somewhat strong argument, which is somewhat higher than the influence of Orthodox and culture. It seems that somebody has taught them rather than making them external influence. Because they are saying there is nothing in the Bible that against infant baptism. And they are also saying according to the instruction of the Bible. So it seems for me, in addition to those influences, there seems somebody who is teaching them, maybe I'm not or something like that.
Yeah, maybe they after, I mean, it's sure that the missionaries, before they left, taught them believers' baptism from the Bible.
Yeah.
But they may have read the Bible themselves and make some conclusions on the basis of that reading. You're right, it could be. But I also think, and you're right, and the point here is that there's not only one reason, there's not only one cause for this practice. It could be many different causes. One is influence from the Orthodox Church, one is Vandana, one is conclusions from their reading of the Bible. And I also think that what you just read give us a hint of another reason. I'm not sure, but I will discuss it with you. Even though the parents cannot confess, even though the infants cannot confess faith in Christ, their parents are Christians. After all, their life belongs to God. Could we read a reason, a motive here? Yeah?
Really, I want to answer to
Yeah.
also. The first page, it says it's an ambiguous statement. I think their belief is that the faith of the parents can save their infants, so the infants can be baptized. So it's related to this dialogue, but I think the word, I think their belief, and also the next passage, there is a statement in honestly speaking, we ourselves used to baptize infants at the very beginning because of ignorance. That's a major word, phrase. So, in some studies, the same passage is conflicting somehow, So sometimes they do this, they assert that infant baptism is good, it's given the green light. Sometimes the comments given here, tries to reject this some of the words. How do you see?
Yeah, but this is interesting because you are from Mechanismus. You are in favor of infant baptism. And because of that, you think that the Bible supports infant baptism. So therefore you would say that they may be in favor of infant baptism because of the Bible, because of what they read there. And you are in favor of believers' baptism, and you would say, if they baptize infants, it's not because of the Bible, it's because of ignorance. You see that? So, and now we should be aware that our doctrinal standpoint not influence our conclusions. Because if you are in favor of believers' baptism, you would say they can never find infant baptism in the Bible. So it could not be because of reading the Bible. But if we try to step one step back and look at it at a distance, trying to get rid of our doctrinal view, we could say objectively that those in favor of infant baptism, us Lutherans, we think that it is what the Bible says. And those of you who are in favor of believers' baptism, you say so because you think it is what the Bible teaches. So we agree not only about baptism, we not only disagree about baptism, we also disagree about what the Bible tells. And I think that when a million Christians could interpret the Bible to be in favor of believers' baptism, it's not strange that some new Christians should read the Bible in this way. And at the same time, if millions of Lutherans believe that the Bible teaches infant baptism, it would not be strange if some new Christians would read the Bible and conclude that it is in favor of infant baptism. So it could be because of the Bible. And then they got to teaching and they see that was ignorant. The Bible really says that we should baptize believers and not infants. You see that? I mean, it's a fact that the Bible could be read in two different ways. I think that the Bible only says one thing, and that is an impulse for us to work with that together. But it is a fact that Christians read the Bible differently, and then you could say that could also be the case there. That they could read the Bible differently. Even some congregations could read the Bible and conclude baptizing infants. And another congregation of new Christians could read the Bible and make the opposite conclusion. Because that was happening for the church worldwide. So both of you could be right, because the Bible could be read in two different ways. And that's a fact. But I think, yeah.
Maybe this is another perspective. I was reading from this book. Vachetti says during the Italian occupation, rural in southern Ethiopia, they only had Gospel of Mark.
That's right.
So they didn't have any other Bible book. So then I have been influenced by their reading about baptism.
I haven't thought about that, but you are completely right, because the missionaries, they happen to translate, I think, 2 Gospels to a local Kabbalah and Hadia language, and only that. So they only had those 2 books to conclude a theology of baptism out of. And there could be a reason also that they didn't have the full New Testament. I haven't thought about that, but you are right about that. There's another reason that I have been thinking about, because, sorry.
Maybe we came from Orthodox background. When we say the Bible for us, 66 only for Protestant.
Yeah.
But for Orthodox, they are 81, 66 plus 15, the extra biblical writings. Many things, including the baptism issue and Dr. Dale, many things they grow or practice from the extra biblical writings we know that the second temple literatures. They use these books, which is not inspired, because it was certainly they are not inspired. As they consider that as a part of the Bible. So,
as a canon.
Majority practice in Orthodox and also in Catholic, they use this as a doctrine, communication. Maybe the influence of this community, they help that orally. In some of them, they do the social reaches, that writing this, they were replaced by it. Then after, the missionary they came and taught that biblical baptism,
I mean, I got a lot of new ideas here, because what this shows is that you have this huge area, and the congregations in northeast of Padilla didn't have any connections with Kamata and Baracho in southwest, or northwest and southeast. So the congregations were very different. In some congregations you had members, converts that came directly from the Orthodox Church, being influenced by the Orthodox Church, and the extra-biblical text and so on. While in other congregations, they came from Pandano. In other congregations, they came from pre-Christian Kabbalah religion, connected to a man called Abasarecho. And you had many different backgrounds. So therefore, it was not the same everywhere in Kabbalah. It was different from place to place. And that could be the reason. So in some congregations, they only had two Gospels translated to the local language, and that was what they had, because none of them may have come from Orthodox.
And also in my area, people who are from Orthodox, even the people, they call that believers, so they didn't read the Bible. Even they don't have the Bible. If they have the Bible, they just cover and they put one here, one bullet, and just, even they don't know how to read. Only they have orally from the priestess. The language is not in their own language. There is a measure to transform some issue. So there is Amharic, and people they hear and they believe in the authority of the priest, the word of the priest. They don't check any words. So all these cultural practices influence the community to transform or transmit this practice.
And I will just show what you do now. Many of you use your empathy to place yourself in the shoes of those new believers and try to imagine how was it at that time. And that gives you an idea of what the reason was, because you are able to identify yourself. And that's very good. I will point to, before the break, to two more possible reasons. If you look at Daimo Abeno, he starts by telling what he has been taught. Because the Bible teaches us that the parents would not suffer the consequences of their children's sin, and the children would not suffer for the sins of their parents. Thus, everybody should be mature enough to repent his sin and confess his faith before baptism. This I will call a very individualistic approach. We are responsible for ourselves and only ourselves. We take a personal decision to convert. That is our own decision, and we as individuals convert. That is a viewpoint that is brought by foreign missionaries. They come from Europe, they come from America, where we are very individualistic. We take care of ourselves, we take our personal decision, we choose our own life, and that fits, so to say, fits into believer's baptism. It doesn't show that it is right or wrong, because that's a question of what the Bible says. But then, when he should describe what the reason was that they baptized infants, he says, Dalano, on the next page, even though the infants cannot confess faith in Christ, their parents are Christians. After all, their life belongs to God. I think we here have a much more collective mindset. We belong together as a people group, as a family. And if one enough, we do not convert as individuals. We convert as a group, as a fellowship. I mean, they are much more fellowship and collective oriented. And therefore, it's obvious that when the parents are converted and baptized, the children should do that also because we belong together. We are fellowship. We cannot, being a Christian is not a personal, individual decision. It's something that we do together because we are fellowship. We are connected. So I think perhaps a reason also could be a worldview or a mindset in that area that is much more collective and fellowship oriented than we are modern people. We think very individualistic. I take my own standpoint. I choose my own life, regardless of what my father taught me. But traditional Ethiopian society is much more collective-minded. You belong together. Your father decides for you, both your occupation and your spouse, and of course also your religion. You see that? And one reason more that's not shown in these sources, but I happened to interview also some of the ladies, the mothers, and they said, yes, we baptized our infants, our babies. Sometimes we had to do it when our husband was away, because he didn't want us to do it. But we were afraid of the evil spirits. And we wanted to protect our babies from the influence of the evil spirits. So as soon as we have given birth to a child and our husband was on a trip, we hurried to baptize our infant, to protect the infant from the evil spirits. So that was a fourth reason. And I have only found out that because I interviewed the ladies. And that just shows how important it is to interview many different groups, because you will get different information depending on who you interview. So that was a reason. So we can conclude that many reasons caused them to baptize infants. Reading the Bible, influence from the Orthodox Church, influence from Vandana, a more collective mindset, and fear of the evil spirits. And then other congregations read the Bible differently and saw that the Bible tells us only to baptize adult believers. So that is what church history is about. It's to describe the situation and do it from different perspectives and get as full a picture as possible. And that is what we have done now. But one thing is left now, because now I think we can conclude, it's at least my conclusion, that you may disagree, but that they in fact baptized infants. But it still doesn't say that infant baptism was the reason for the split. Because the missionaries, they returned in 43, 44. And the split was 10 years later. And the mechanism says that the missionaries returned and forbid them to baptize infants, and therefore they broke away. But we have 10 years between the return of the missionaries and the breakaway. I mean, why did they wait 10 years to break away? They have had many babies in those 10 years that they wanted to baptize. So I think it could be true, and I think it's true that they baptized infants, but I still don't think it was the main reason for the split. That was Angkor and some other things. not least some social issues between the poorer part of the congregations and the more richer part. Because the time span between the return of the missionaries and the split shows that this issue has disappeared. And I found one after my interviewing in Gabadadia, I found one written source from SIM that I found in the archive. That was a minute taken from a meeting of mediation in Addis Ababa between those two groups. And there, one of the leaders were present, Abagol, and he admitted also that they sometimes baptized infants. But he said that was many years ago, and not an issue at that point. So the source confirmed the old sources that once they baptized infants for different reasons, but they have stopped doing that many years before the split. And I just showed McDonald, the SA missionary that have insisted that they have never baptized infants. I showed him the sources, and he said, okay, I agree. It decided for me. I see that they baptized infants, but when I came as a missionary in the 50s, they never told me about it. But I can see you are right. They did that during the occupation, but I never heard about it. And that shows again that you should not stop by just going to the missionaries, because many things they didn't know. You have to go to the local people, otherwise you only get part of the truth, a little part of the truth. Because he only knew what happened at the mission station. If you want to know what happened out in the congregations, you should do the interview. And that just shows the possibility of using all sources. I mean, you get a lot of very good information using the all sources. So that is important. But let us then first register, and then you can, and we take a break after. Anduana, yeah. Asefa, Binya, David, Delsu, Elias, Eyo, Eyon, Haptama, Hailu, Hanya, Hinok, Kushnia, Maisen, Melsha, Mikyas, yes. Mentus note is not here. Moluken is not here. Opsa, you are there. Target, yeah. Thomas, Tickest, not here. Tensei, yeah. Sega, Wondimu, Surya, yeah. Adana, and Simon. Good. Let's have a break. Be back again 7:30. Who? He has asked permission. Yeah. So this is absent, but he asked permission. Yeah. But he was allowed to do that. You have to be aware. Yeah, you said that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But you have been here up to now, so you can afford to do that. So,
what do you prefer to do? The local church? Kadana or district?
I mean, I would prefer that you do a specific study. If you take the whole of the leeward, it may be too broad and too huge. But choose a more narrow. Yes, but then you should find a very specific question that you should focus on in order, a problem, so that you narrow it down to a very specific focus question.
Getting some fresh air.
Just to get some fresh air, so that none of us is going to sleep because of the thick air.
Good. I should mention one thing more concerning this baptism issue. I mean, it's fairly sure that infant baptism was practiced in some congregations during the occupation. That we can say based on the sources. But we can only say that it was the case in some congregations. We cannot say how widespread it was, because I haven't used a sampling technique or something like that. That is very difficult when we are talking about something that far back in time. We could do it for a more recent phenomenon. Then we could make a more sociological investigation, taking sampling and so on. But we only know that it happened somewhere, and that's all. And then we should take one thing more concerning all sources, and then we are done with this. And I will give you again an example on that phenomenon. And this example I will give you will show the importance of using both oral and written sources together. And it will also give you an idea of how you can sometimes go behind the events and find view and attitudes behind the behavior. We did that partly when it came to baptism. We tried to go behind the practice and ask, why did they start baptizing? And that's the interesting part. But when we do that, we should always be very cautious not to be too strong in our statements. Then we should use very cautious words. It seems to me, and so on. But the last point is that it is often only the events that is perceived to have had influence on the subsequent development that are remembered. All other things are forgotten. I mean, all of us, we have experienced quite a lot in our life. And many things we have forgotten. Some things we remember. And that also applies to those we are going to interview. They have forgotten a lot. And we tend to forget all the things that we do not think have had influence on the subsequent development, on the time after. If they haven't had any influence in our view, we forget it. But we can forget sometimes something that we didn't think have had influence, but that in fact had some influence. I will give you an example of that. And again, we will go to Kabbalah. I mentioned that in the 50s we had 3 different crises in that area. First, the third crisis was the split. The second crisis was a crisis between the mission and the church. But the first crisis was strife between the younger generation and the old leaders. The leaders were the first converts. It was Abba Gore, it was Arthur Servo, it was Arthur Shigud. They were the first converts, and they became the leaders, and they continued to be the leaders. But when we came into the 50s, we had some younger people who wanted to share the leadership, and some of them had got some education, and they also thought that this qualified them to be leaders in the church. I have shown you the result of a mediation meeting, and you heard about that earlier. But we should go a bit deeper into that strife, because we had two attempts of mediation. First, SIM, the mission, became aware of this strife. So they sent their General Secretary, Guy Playfair, down to heal the strife. And then also Emmanuel Gebrselassie, one of the Mekanisus leaders in Addis Ababa, came down to help them to get united again. Playfair, he came down as a leader from SIM. He was a very self-conscious missionary. He arranged a 2-day meeting, and we know very much about that because very detailed minutes were taken from that meeting. Every single saying in that meeting was written down, and I found that in the archives of SIM. And after the meeting, he reported home that the problems were solved. He himself has solved the problems, and the mediation had succeeded, and the strife was healed. No problems at all anymore. Then I interviewed a man that is today, he has passed away now, but when I was there, he was an old man. Atoreto. He was, at that time, one of the younger rebels who wanted to have a share in the leadership. And I could see from the minutes that he had a very central role during the meeting. There was a lot of quotations of Reto. He said quite a lot. But when I interviewed him, I wanted to ask him about that meeting. And he had no remembrance at all of the meeting. He couldn't remember that Playfair had been there. He couldn't remember anything about the meeting by a SIM missionary that tried to heal the strife. And that was striking because otherwise he had a very good memory. He could take details about what had happened 50 years ago. But he had no remembrance at all of the meeting. And I took the minutes and showed him, you said this and this. Couldn't remember anything. And then I thought, why is it so? And that is exactly an example of that what we don't think have had any influence, we tend to forget. And when we go to the written sources, we can see that the strife wasn't healed at all. It continued. Playfair, he wrote that he had done anything, completed anything, and the strife was healed. But the subsequent sources tells us that it was not the case. The strife continued. And I think it was because of that Reto just forgot the meeting, because it didn't have any effect on the problems. But you remember the meeting by Emmanuel Gebrselassie, and you remember that he was there, and that brought the strife to an end. And then we can go to the old sources and get a deeper insight into the situation. then we can ask the all sources, how did they proceed when they tried to mediate? How did Playfair do, and how did Emmanuel Gebre Selassie do? What was the difference? And could we find an explanation of the success of Emmanuel Gebre Selassie and that he failed Playfair in the way they did the mediation? That is an interesting question. Could we find something in the way that George Playfair did the mediation that caused his failure? And could we find something in the way that Emmanuel Gebre Selassie did the mediation that gave him a success? That's a question for you. And it shows you that, yes, you can describe a mediation, but you can also go behind it and find out something about the local environment from this event. Let us look at it. First, Playfair, he staged the mediation as a trial, as a court case, where he was the judge. And he said, the opposition, the younger group, they are the accusers, and the leaders, the old leaders, they are the defenders. And then I will give you, and that is in fact a bit funny, but I will give you an extract of the mediation minutes. And you can look at it, and then you can try to find out and try to evaluate his way of doing it. So imagine a meeting. You have two groups. You have the old leaders, that is Abagorda, that is Atosebro, that is Atoshibut, and a missionary, Mr. Klaus. Then you have the younger group, that is Atoretabu, and then you have them sitting in the room, and you have the great General Secretary of SIM, George Playfair, as the judge. He's sitting as the judge. And then Mr. Playfair says, I understand both sides have agreed to my judgment. Is this right? Do you agree? Abinger, that was one of the younger people, do you agree? Abinger says, we want a judgment that seems right. No, are they going to accept my judgment? He says they, because he speaks through an interpreter. Abinger says, yes. And to several, he answered, when a person tells his own side, the judging of the matter is with the judge. We will review it, receive it, if we feel it is according to the Bible. Mr. Playfair, are they going to accept my judgment? Abagorda, if the truth is told, yes, we will receive it. Wait, I will see to it. There will be no favor shown. I must have the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There will be no preferences. Now Abinger with his people are the accusers, the plaintiffs, so as such they will state the case. Mr. Playfair, you say Retabu, we haven't finished the other. I mean, now we are some time further in the meeting. You say, Retabu, we haven't finished the other case they had discussed. The other matter is clear to me. Abinger, how can the first matter be settled without witnesses on either side? Always there are things which rise up between us, and we leave it like this, and if we leave it like this, it will never be settled. Where is the witness? Playfair say. Abagorda, there's one thing. This is not a matter for play. Playfair, I called for a witness, be quiet. Abagorda interrupted. I warn you, if we find anyone lying, it will be serious. We are not satisfied, Abagorda says. Mr. Kauser, can you quieten that man? Don't. And, I mean, Abagorda is not is not a common man. He was a leader in Hadia society, former slave trader who had converted. He was a mighty leader in society. And Playfair, he just said, quiet him. Be quiet to him. That man is playing with me. So did Abagorda. I want an answer. I don't want to hear this school business again, said Playfair. I want yes or no. We have heard this 5 or 6 times. I want an answer without all those stories. So I think this gives you an idea of how this mediation was taking place. Playfair, he aimed at and he pushed for admission and confession of wrongdoing and guilt. And he said, everyone should confess what they have done wrong, then there should be punishment or forgiveness. Therefore, he just focused on what each parties have done wrong. He wanted the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about what every one of them have done wrong. And when the question of wrongdoing and guilt at a certain point was clear to him, he just rushed to the next point. So we just want to find out what everyone in the room have done wrong, and when that was clear to him, he just stepped to the next point. And that was deeply unsatisfactory for the local people. And in addition to that, they were very reluctant to admit and confess wrongdoing, especially the elder people, because they lose face when they do that. What did Emmanuel Gebre Selassie do? He has, from the beginning, set a whole week aside for the mediation. The first 2-3 days, he just spent listening to both parties, presenting their views in detail and discussing it. He didn't rush from one point to another. He just sat down and used 2-3 days to listen as each party presented their case, and told about what happened, what had happened. Then he gave some suggestions as to changes in the church that could possibly remove some of the causes for the strike, and after that he just withdrew from the discussion, and then he let the parties, the 2 parties, the following 3 days draw what they called rules concerning the church in Kabata, what you have been given, where they state all the changes that they themselves find necessary to remove the causes of the strike and settle it. So he used time, he let them talk and talk and talk and tell, and then he let them, he didn't care about guilt, responsibility, forgiveness. He just wanted to have them make some new arrangements that could remove the causes for the crisis. And he just let them do that. He withdrew and let them do that, and they made up this paper, signed it, and we can see that the strike was healed. And the church continued. Then there was some other crisis coming up, but this strike was healed. And those involved in the strike remained in the Kalua church and continued to be leaders of the church, also at Radek and the others. So then we should discuss just shortly, could you describe the difference of approach if you compare Playfair and Emmanuel Gebre Selassie? What's the difference? Why did Emmanuel Gebre Selassie succeeded in healing the strike, but Playfair not? Can we discover an underlying difference in the 2 approaches? that tells us something about the culture. What do you think? I mean, Simon and I, we are from the West. We would have done it Playfair's way. But what would then be wrong? Why wouldn't we succeed? And why did Emmanuel do the right thing and succeed in leading?
Truth is mostly subjective. Instead of looking objective explanations, most of the culture subjective experience and expression. So that's why
Yeah. You say truth is subjective. You cannot aim for an objective truth about people's doing. And that is what Playfair tried to do. He thinks that there is some objective truth about who has done right and who has done wrong. And he wants the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I mean, you can see a movie from an American court case for your eyes when you see him being at that mediation. Yeah. Other considerations that can learn us how to do those. Simon, what did you bring?
What?
If you were there.
Yeah. Instead of going the Western way directly to the issue, Emmanuel Selassie spent time where people could talk and present their point of view, and was maybe more interested in the relation than the information. Maybe that's Wilson's people shoulder to not being ready to fight, but ready to meet each other.
So Emmanuel Gebrselassie, Simon Says, were more interested in relations than in truth. For him, the relation was the important thing. Whereas for Playfair, it was a question of guilt, wrongdoing, forgiveness, and punishment. But for Emmanuel Gebrselassie, it was much more about relationship. Yeah? Could we have other considerations in this?
and maybe our culture was more oral in our orientation. So instead of reporting, people would like tell, informing. So he was listening to them, he was listening to their versions and everything. So that part gave me some kind of confidence.
Yeah, that's a way to do it. I mean, Playfair, he just wanted very concrete information. You have done that wrong, that's it. Whereas Emmanuel Gebrselassie, he approached the local culture as an oral culture, where narratives, where storytelling is a way of solving problems. I mean, I tell you that in old societies, you store information in narratives, in stories. And you also use stories to solve problems. So that's part of it. You use a story to solve a problem. Telling the story is a way to solve the problem. You see that? Could we have other considerations? Simon?
Matter of respect.
Yeah?
He was very disrespectful. And he didn't get the direct answer he wanted. Quiet campaign.
Yeah. I mean, that's, in fact, I interviewed Emmanuel Gebrselassie. I asked him, why did you succeed? And I showed him the minutes from Playfair's mediation to let him himself tell. And he said, one thing in Ethiopian culture is important, to show due respect for the Shumagale, the elders. I mean, Kausa, Shigota, several, they were younger. I met Shigota, I met Abagole many years later, but even so, they were Shemagloch at that time. And you have to show them respect. You have to give them more time to speak than the others. He told Emmanuel Celeste. I knew that I had to show them respect by letting them talk and talk and talk. Otherwise, I would be a failure. It would fail my attempt to mediate. I had to show respect to those migrants. So that was also the reason. Although
in part of the power distribution, both the young people or your leadership.
yeah, I mean, they make some new arrangement. They don't care about what had happened, who did wrong, who did right. They make arrangement, you see that on the paper, that remove some of the causes for the strike. And in this way, they make a healing. Not by confession and forgiveness, but to make arrangement that remove the causes for the strike by including some of the younger people into leadership, and then you heal the fellowship. You heal the relations. The relations are not healed by confessing and punishing and forgiving. It is healed by restoring the fellowship, restoring the relations, by removing what had broken the relations between them. Yeah?
Additionally, there was no mutual respect. I mean, mutual respect when you are in different cultures. I mean, there are social structures that you should abide in the way you dress, the way you talk. Even at Ethiopia, I was touring in Ethiopia one time, and in some places, the driver said to me, "Do not speak, just be quiet." In some places, you should interact.
Exactly.
There are lots of, I mean, even Ethiopia is like, they have different kind of cultures. It seems like you are going to another country. So even this thing, Mr. Playfair didn't respect the norms there. So by that motion, he was not respecting the authorities that authority Abadole. So it's even Abadole is seen so patiently addressing him up to the end. He was highly tolerant.
He was
tolerating the.
Even if he was annoyed about it.
He was annoyed. He just masked it that end.
Exactly.
And he just keep on going, showing his Christian values and his culture, respect for others. Maybe for those coming from abroad.
Yes, and I think the sources also showed kind of the dynamic between local leaders and missionaries. And you can read a lot out of that, about the relation between missionaries of a certain type and local people. And I think that it shows the Western way is a very individualistic way. When you have a conflict, it is about relation between individuals, and therefore you have to find out who did wrong against one, against who, and then you have forgiveness or punishment. Whereas the Ethiopian way is a more collective, fellowship-oriented approach, where a crisis is, first of all, not something between individuals, but it's something that has destroyed or harmed the fellowship. And you heal that not by focusing on individuals, but focusing again on the fellowship and remove what have destroyed the fellowship, so that the fellowship, the relationships are again restored. You see that? You see a difference between a Western individualistic mind and an Ethiopian more fellowship-oriented way. And that comes to the surface through a crisis. And often you see those things coming to the surface through crisis. Therefore, often crises are good to study because you find a lot of things behind if you're good enough to look at it. So you can use a crisis to describe the crisis and the solving of the crisis, but you can use the crisis also to reveal many other things. I will end today.
One last thing I will remember, the Shamanic place in many tribes, they bless you before you start any investment, even the prime minister here, they give their blessings. If you don't adhere to the procedures, you'll be automatically rejected. I mean, the people will be listening to their local giant leaders. So those procedures should be adhered. Even if you are a local, even if you might be a prime minister. So
I will close today by telling you a story, because I met Abagor. He was an old man at that time. He has a very interesting story, because before he converted, he was a slave trader. He went down to Malaita and captured people, and then he took them to Addis Ababa and sold them as slaves. But then he converted, and of course he stopped doing that. But he was a leader in society. He was a very large man, great man, and he still was, and deeply respected in Hosanna. I was once sitting in a Buddha bed, and we were chatting together, and suddenly a huge man appeared in the door. And people just became completely quiet and turned towards him, and it was Abagor coming in. And people just saw him and watched him and showed deep, deep respect for him. And you remember, this was the man that he acquired this faith. And of course, when he then converted, he became the leader in the church, not only in Kamadadia, but in the Kanibot nationwide. But then there is a further story, because I interviewed him, and I was invited for dinner, so we ate dinner together, and afterward I had an interview, and then after we had finished the interview, Abagor, you know, this former slave trader and leader, and he would work nationwide and leader in Hadia, he said to me, there's one thing more I want to say to you. I know you are single, and I have a daughter. I want to give my daughter as your wife. And I just observed that there was a lady who was serving me during the dinner. You know, steadily. And it was his daughter. So he wanted to offer me his daughter as my wife. He knew that I was single at that time. So in fact, I was offered the daughter of Abagor, former slave trader, leader of Hadia society, leader of Kanibot. And what do you answer?
Which one is
very strategic.
Well, what he said, I mean, I couldn't just upfront say no. That would annoy him greatly. I mean, he offered me the best he had. What do you say? I'm not married to her today, so I'm going to start. But I thought, what do we say now? I said, you know, and then I started a speech. I have noticed your daughter. She is extremely beautiful. And she is very good at cooking, and she's very good at serving me. I couldn't imagine a better wife. She is fantastic. And I used quite a lot of time to praise her. And he was proud of that. And then I said, but I'm sorry, because my parents, they have told me to marry one from my own tribe. So I have to say no thanks. And then he said, okay, if your parents have told you to marry one from your own tribe, it's okay. I will understand that. I will understand that. Because that's the way we do it also. So it's okay. But then I married a Norwegian, and that's not my tribe. So that was Avigdor. It was very interesting. And that's also something that you will encounter when you're doing people. So if you are single and want to do a good paper, just go out and do some people. Fine, let us dismiss.